On the line with us, Manu Baskaran, Director and CEO of Centennial Asia Advisors of Singapore. Good morning, Mr. Manu.
Good morning.
Morning.
Mr. Manu, how do you compare the street protests in Malaysia over the weekend with Singapore's recent election outcome, in which the opposition has been able to make some inroad, and also with the Pheu Thai's victory in the Thai election last week?
Oh, these are very different events with different dynamics of their own. In the Singapore case, we had an electorate that was basically quite happy with the existing structure of governance and the current government. All they wanted was a bit more change, a bit more in terms of an opposition voice, check and balance, but they didn't want to change anything else. In Malaysia's case, there is a growing revulsion against corruption and perceived, machinations by various parties to distort the electoral process and so on. So it's a bit more fundamental in Malaysia's case. And in Thailand's case, of course, you had a general election. So the issue was settled by the voters through the ballot box. And hopefully from here onwards, we will get more reconciliation in Thailand.
Mm-hmm. And do you think Malaysia will be able to achieve stability after this round of protests?
For the 50-odd years of its independence, Malaysia has been a remarkably stable country. And my expectation is that the political leaders on the government side and the leaders of the protests will avoid any escalation of tensions and will find some amicable way to resolve this current level of tension.
And how do you view the dynamics of political change in Southeast Asia?
The general tendency is for people to want a clean government with checks and balances so that a government in power cannot abuse its power. They want greater emphasis on social safety nets, poorest segments of the population, whether in Thailand or Malaysia or Singapore, want a fairer treatment and are demanding that through the ballot box. So the basic trend is demand for change, and those systems that can adjust and adapt to it will be the more stable ones.
Right. Okay, thank you, Mr. Manu.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
And we have another analyst from Straits Times correspondent based in Kuala Lumpur, Mr. Leslie Lopez. Mr. Lopez, what is your view on the Malaysia government's handling of the protest? Do you think that it could have been less violent?
Well, certainly the government could have taken a much more lighter approach than this heavy-handed response. Many people think that engaging the protesters would have been a much better way to deal with this situation rather than, impose a lockdown on the capital.
Mm-hmm. Right. So will this protest lead to an electoral reform in Malaysia as demanded by the protesters?
Well, that really is to be seen. The government has indicated that it's willing to talk, but at this point in time, I don't think many people see engagement taking place. Positions have been hardened, so there's really no signs that there will be any discussions in the near future at this point.
Mm-hmm. And do you think that the Malaysian Prime Minister would make any compromise to calm the opposition?
Well, so far, like I said earlier, positions are quite hardened between the Malaysian government and protesters, and also the opposition. There have been appeals by the Prime Minister that street protests shouldn't be made. Isn't a part of the Malaysian culture, and protesters should, and also the Bersih group should avoid from carrying out more street protests. But he hasn't seemed to have indicated that there will be moves for electoral reform. But people are hopeful that he will move that way.
Right. So what is the implication of the street protests to Malaysia's future politics then?
Well, I think politics in Malaysia is in for a bumpy ride next few months. You know, it depends on how really. What has happened now is I think there is the government has lost some of its political prestige. Question today, and I think the big challenge today is how Prime Minister Najib and his government claw back that prestige ahead of polls which are widely anticipated sometime later within the next 1 year.
Thank you very much, Mr. Leslie. Right, and of course, coming up next, Dubai talk. Pheu Thai party member in Dubai and the Thai-Cambodian border business revived after the break.